This video is for my pre-algebra classes. It is over lesson 33, subtracting integers. So ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to subtracting integers, often we change this into addition when we're starting. So remember that minus a number is the same as plus its opposite. As we get closer and closer to algebra, though, we start discovering some shortcuts regarding subtracting integers and adding integers. And one of the things we begin to notice is that the minus sign can basically be treated like a negative sign. And so if we think of it that way, we get this other phrase that emerges that's helpful. And that's the one that I want to focus on today. And that's the phrase you see right here. Minus a negative is the same as plus a positive. So ladies and gentlemen, anytime that you find you're in a situation where you see minus a negative, and it's important that it's in that order, okay? If it's a negative minus, no good. It's got to be minus a negative. So the minus sign followed by a negative. And minus a negative is the same as, let me grab my orange here, plus a positive. So in any other circumstance, if we've got minus a positive, we are instead going to think of the minus being like a negative sign. So if you just saw a minus 2, you'd think of that being like negative 2. If you saw a minus 7, you'd think of that as being like minus or negative 7. So ladies and gentlemen, we're going to do a few examples here. And so for our first example, I'm going to come over here. We're going to label this example 1. And in the book, you might see something that looks like this. And so one thing that you'll see the book do a lot is the use of parentheses to group the sign with the number. And so this makes it clear because minus is what's called a binary operation. So whenever you've got a minus sign, I'll go to my dry erase board here. Whenever I have a minus sign, since this is a binary operation, there should be some number out in front of it and some number behind it. So bi meaning two, binary operation, there are two things that we're using to subtract. However, with a negative sign just happens to a single number. And so with the parentheses there, and there being nothing in the parentheses in front of that symbol, it has to be a negative. Now on the other hand, this minus here, having this set of parentheses in front and this set of parentheses behind, means that must be an actual minus sign. So we've got negative 12 minus negative 3. So ladies and gentlemen, what we're going to be doing then on the homework is we are going to copy the problem, first of all. Now, how we copy the problem here, though, is going to be a little bit different from the way the book writes it. You can certainly write it the way the book does, but one of the things that I like to do is I like to take my negative signs, and when we type them out in a computer or we write them in a book, it can be difficult to distinguish between a minus sign and a negative sign. It can be hard to get a different symbol there. It tends to just all look the same. But on paper, we have a little bit more freedom. So what I like to do with my negative and positive signs is I like to make them a little smaller and push them up. And so my negative 12, I might write like that. And so by making that a little smaller and pushing it up, I can tell obviously that's a negative 12. Then my minus is a bit bigger and in the middle. And then my negative 3 goes up there. So on paper, I'm going to do what I can't do necessarily on the computer. And so that saves me from having to write those parentheses in. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the point of today's lesson, we're going to be looking at, for the phrase, minus a negative. So in this situation, do we see minus a negative? Well, yeah, we do. So take your yellow there, and let's highlight the minus and the negative. So anytime we find minus and negative, we are going to instantly, and I want to see you do this throughout the year, change this to plus a positive. So the first number is not going to change. And in that way, this is kind of like dividing fractions, where the first fraction doesn't change, but then we times by the reciprocal of the second fraction. It's kind of the same thing here in a way, that the first number doesn't change, but then this is going to become plus a positive. So plus a positive 3. Now normally you write positive symbols, they can be invisible. This time I've got a purpose for it. I want to see that positive symbol there. And we're going to highlight that with orange, just like we put this in orange. So negative 12 minus negative 3 is the same as a negative 12 plus a positive 3. And so now that I've got it in terms of addition, we're going to solve this. And so we've got rules for adding integers. Remember that when we add integers, if they have the same sign, then we're really going to add them and keep the sign. If they have opposite signs or different signs, then we're really going to subtract them and keep the bigger numbers sign. So if we follow those rules, this is a negative 12, this is a positive 3, they have different signs. That means I'm going to subtract them. So 12 minus 3 is going to give me a 9. But then the bigger number there being 12, since it's negative, this will be a negative as well. So if we follow the rules that we've learned, that's what we'd get. Another way to think this through is if you were to imagine a number line, you can just kind of do a sketch in your mind. Now remember, a sketch is different from a graph because a sketch doesn't have to have all the details. It just gives us the main ideas. So here, if we start at 0, a negative 12 would send me 12 to the left, and then a positive 3 would just send me 3 back to the right. So I'm going to have to come back 3 towards 0. So, well, if this is 12, 3 back here would be 9, and since on the negative side, negative 9. So whether you think of a sketch in your mind or you follow the rules, it's still going to end up negative 9 either way. Now, this is all great and all. However, let's talk homework now. What do I want to see on the homework? So go ahead and skip a line here, and we're going to write on HW. HW there standing for homework. Now, first of all, I would consider this what I call a red light problem. There's something to copy, there's an answer, but then there's also work to show. So this is a red light problem. On the homework, I'm going to copy my problem down. And then to change this to plus a positive, I'm going to let you do this very quickly and easily, actually. All you got to do is go plus positive. Now, normally we don't write a positive symbol. So this is going to be a clue to us that if ever we see a plus and a positive, that this must have started as minus a negative. So copying negative 12 minus negative 3 was copying the problem. Putting this line and that line was my work to change it into plus a positive. And then as we've already discussed, they have opposite signs, so we're going to subtract them. 12 minus 3 is 9, and the bigger number is negative, so negative 9. So that's what that red light problem would look like on the homework. All right, so I'm going to put a dashed line here, and we're going to take a look at what we're going to call example 2. So for example 2, I'm going to have parenthesis negative 12 minus parenthesis positive 3. Again, this is what you might see in the book. So just like before, our first step is going to be to copy the problem. Forgot my L. Actually, my B turned into an L. There we go. So when I copy this down, though, again, I'm going to take my negative and kind of push it up so I can tell it's obviously a negative, so that way I don't need the parentheses to identify that as a negative sign. I'm going to leave my minus alone, but then a positive 3, I'm just going to write that as 3. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is where this red pen should come into our thinking. So when we see a negative 12 minus 3, we're really thinking of this as a negative 12, and then thinking of the minus 3 as a negative 3. And we happen to be putting them together. So when you see negative 12 minus 3, you're thinking this is really negative 12 plus a negative 3. That's how we do it in algebra. So if that's all it is, honestly, we're just ready to solve this then. So a negative 12 and a negative 3 have the same sign. Same sign means we're going to add the numbers together. So 12 plus 3 is 15. And since they're both negative, this is negative. Or again, if you want to imagine a sketch, so if we imagine a sketch here, if that's 0, a negative 12 would take me 12 this way. A negative 3 would take me 3 more that way. So 12 and then 3 more makes a total of 15 in the negative direction. So either way you think about it, it's negative 12. So what kind of problem would this be then? Well, you're going to copy the problem, you're going to write your answer. So this would actually be a yellow light problem. And then we're going to write on the homework. So what do I expect to see on the homework? Well, I expect to see you copy the problem, negative 12 minus a positive 3. But we're going to treat this minus 3 like a negative 3. And so a negative 12 and a negative 3 makes a negative 15. And there we go. Dash line, example 3. For example 3, let's say we had the directions to turn the subtraction into addition and then solve. And let's redo this last problem. Negative 12 minus positive 3. In this case, I'm still going to copy the problem. And I would copy it just as we copied it before, negative 12 minus 3. But then because we're doing this now, I'm following the directions, I have to add in that extra step. So we're going to change the subtracting a number into add the opposite. So negative 12 will stay the same, but then minus a positive 3 will become plus a negative 3, which again is why we imagine a minus 3 really is a negative 3. And then finally, we'll solve, which we've already solved this twice. So third time here, it's still going to be negative 15. So by changing the directions here, this yellow light problem just turned into a red light problem. So if the directions ask you to change your subtraction into addition first, they're always going to be a red light problem. And so on the homework, we will actually have to have 3 very identifiable parts in order to fit the directions. So we will have to have our negative 12 minus our positive 3 copied. We will then have to write that with a plus sign. So we've got it copied with a minus, we got it copied with a plus, and then finally the answer. Oops, my paper moved here. So in general, if it ever asks you to change the subtraction into addition, you will have to have these clear 3 parts to it. The problem copied with a minus sign, the problem rewritten with a plus sign, and the answer. All right, and then one more. This one a bit more complicated. We'll call this example 4. And I'm going to have parenthesis, -6, close parenthesis, plus +8, plus a -3, minus a -9, minus a +5, minus a -7, plus a -1. And that's a little bit of a beast, but we're going to take it in pieces. So our first step, as always, is going to be to copy the problem. And what I'd like you to do for this one here is I would like you to skip down 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces, and then underneath that we're going to write on the homework. That's where on the homework is going to go this time. So 4 empty spaces between these two we're going to need. So when I go to copy this, I'm going to copy this. I'm going to make my negative sign up in little, plus, I don't need the positive, so I'm just going to make that 8, plus -3, I'll make that negative up there, minus -9, get that negative up there, minus +5, really it's just 5, minus -7, we'll get that negative up there, and then plus -1, I'll get that negative up there. And then let's just go ahead and rewrite that one more time down here. So we're going to copy the problem. That's the first thing. Copy the problem on the homework, copy the problem. All right, step 2. We're going to look for all the times we find plus or minus a negative to change it to plus a positive. So grab your yellow highlighter first, because remember yellow highlighter is minus a negative. So let's find all the places we found minus a negative. So that's got a plus, that's a plus. Minus -9. So minus -9. And then I have a -5 minus negative 7. And then plus -1. Okay, so just 2 places. I find it in 2 places. So then what we're going to do is change those into plus a positive. So this is still going to be a -6 plus 8 plus -3. But then this minus -9 will change to plus +9. And grab your orange highlighter there. It'll change to plus positive. Okay, keep going. I've got a -5, but then my minus -7 will change to plus positive. And then plus -1. Now from here, there's several different ways that you can solve this. I'm going to give my top recommendation here. My top recommendation here is instead of just taking this whole problem on or going back and forth, whatnot, I'm going to recommend that you combine positives and that you combine negatives. So combine all the things that are the same. Because remember that when we add a positive with a positive, we're going to end up with an even bigger positive. So we'll add the numbers together and it stays positive. We know that we've been doing that for ages. But also when we add a negative with a negative, we get an even bigger negative. So you're really going to add the numbers together and then keep it negative. So let's just put together all the things that are the same. So I want you to grab another color highlighter here. I'm going to grab my blue. And let's start with the positives. I'm just going to underline positive there. I'm going to go up to this problem here, and I'm going to look just for the positives. So I got a positive 8 now. I have a positive 9 now. So that makes 17. I have a positive 7. So 17 plus 7 makes a positive 24 then. All right, and that's all my positives. So when I put the positives together, I get a positive 24. Now I'm going to grab my green here, and let's put together our negatives. So I got a negative 6 plus a negative 3 would make a negative 9, and then a minus 5 is going to be like a negative 5. That's why I skipped it last time, because minus 5, we're going to treat that like a negative 5. So a negative 9 and a negative 5 makes a negative 14, and then a negative 1 will make a negative 15. So plus a negative 15. So if I put all my positives together, I get a positive 24. If I put all my negatives together, which includes that minus 5, remember, I get a negative 15. And last of all, we're going to finish off, we're going to solve it. So now that I did that little simplification step, if I got a positive 24 and a negative 15, so again, you can follow the rules there, or if we think about making a sketch out of this, a positive 24 would send me 24 this way, but then a negative 15 would send me not quite as far back. So 24 minus 15 will put me at 9, but still on the positive side. So positive 9. Now on the homework, what's this going to look like? Well, we're going to change minus a negative 9 to plus a positive 9, minus a negative 7 to plus a positive 7. And then just like we did, I'd combine my positives, positive 8, positive 9, positive 7 would give me a positive 24. A negative 6, a negative 3 would make a negative 9. Minus 5 would make a negative 14. Minus 1 would make a negative 15. And then when we add those together, we get 9. And that's how I would put that together on the homework. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of our lesson.